Okay, so it's one after, it's 2:30 Pacific time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to everybody. Today's webinar is focusing on forging your career in academia and industry. My name is Lindsay and I manage marketing at Seabird Scientific. And I'm really happy to have an expert team from Seabird Scientific as well as the Oceanography Society to present to you on this really important topic that we're super passionate about here at Seabird. And it just so happens to be the first day of World Oceans Month. So for those of you that don't know, June is World Oceans Awareness Month. And it's really important to recognize the necessity for people that are coming out of education, people that are graduating, people that are getting higher education, to really help facilitate their transition into a career. And whether you're interested in pursuing a career path in academia or industry, we have a bunch of experts on the line that can help kind of guide you through their path so you can understand what it's like transitioning from education into a role in academia, or what it's like working in the private sector in the oceanography industry. And we also have another expert who's actually done both. So you'll kind of get a different spread of all of the different routes that you can take. And we're really excited to present to you. And we really hope that this is valuable for you in deciding your next paths in your career. So just to go through a bit of housekeeping or the agenda. So we'll do a quick intro and housekeeping on kind of expectations throughout the webinar. Then we'll go into the academia session, which will be hosted by Deborah Bronk from the Oceanography Society. Next, we'll transition into the industry session, which will be hosted by our experts at Seabird Scientific. And then we'll go into a panel session where the panelists will be asked curated questions that kind of guide interesting conversation into, different things that you should know when you're trying to transition into your career after education. And then finally, we'll end it off with a Q&A and a conclusion. And so just some quick housekeeping. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them into the Q&A. If our team is able to answer them, just through the Q&A, they'll do so, but there will also be a designated Q&A session at the end where you can put your Q&A question into the Q&A chat, and then we will answer it at the end live. So please just know that your questions will get answered. And without further ado, let's go and get started. So Jenny, are you able to push the poll live for us? My screen is not letting me push it live since I'm presenting at this time.
I actually don't see a poll tool on my menu board.
Okay. Okay, we might have to skip this. I've been having some issues with Zoom. So we'll skip the poll, but it was really just to kind of get a feel for where everybody is coming from, whether you're an undergraduate student, a graduate student, or maybe you're a working professional trying to make a career transition. So I know that there's a wide variety of people that are on the call based on who registered. And so, yeah, just really good to see that there's a lot of variety of people that are looking to get, feedback or more information on this topic. So I'll go into now an overview of the experts that we'll have on the call today. So first and foremost, I'm really excited to have Deborah Bronk, the TOS president, present on her career path and her route into academia. Next, we have Genevieve Howell, who is the Director of Products and Global Services at Seabird Scientific. So Genevieve has been with Seabird for a number of years and can provide kind of her career path through many, many different roles at Seabird. And so we'll be really excited to hear from her. And then next we'll go into Dr. Jochen Klinke, our Director of Science at Seabird, and his kind of interesting route through his career coming from academia into a transitionary role into industry. And so he'll have some interesting perspectives there as well. And next, I'm really excited to have Deborah Bronk, the TOS president, come and kind of provide a little bit of background on the Oceanography Society. And so we'll just hear a little bit of a word from her. So go ahead, Deb.
Hi, everybody. Really excited to see some names I recognize in the participant list. Hi, Mar. So the Oceanography Society is, I would say, one of the three major societies that is tries to support the oceanographic community globally. We are, of the three societies, we have a real strength, I think, in marine technology, and which is, I think, becoming increasingly important. And yeah, so that's it's been a great organization. Just started my presidency. We are governed by a council of elected members, and you'll see a theme later in when I talk about my own career path, the value of scientific societies and getting involved with them as a way of exploring different aspects of the science enterprise. I think they're incredibly valuable entities that I've given a lot of my time to over the years.
Awesome. Thank you, Deb. Now we will go into a quick overview of Seabird Scientific. So I actually have our new brand video to share that kind of gives you a really inside look at what we do. But at a high level, we're one of the leading oceanographic instrument manufacturers around the globe. So we work with customers on international programs around the globe, specializing in things such as optics, CTDs, all of those, name keystone oceanographic instruments. And, we are kind of unique in that we're an ecosystem partner. So not only are we designing and creating these instruments, but we're also working with our customers on the ground to make sure that we're providing effective solutions for them to solve their problems that ultimately contribute to things like climate change, ocean acidification understanding, and all of those types of things. So without further ado, I will just share our new brand video that I'm really excited to present that gives you an inside look at Seabird Scientific. So here we are.
One of the things that I really think that everyone should understand about the ocean is that no matter how far away from the ocean you are, it affects your life. It controls the weather. It's where we get our food from. And we depend on it for our health. No matter how far away from the ocean you are, it does impact your life.
People don't understand the oceans because you don't see it, right? We fly, we can see the air, we can kind of be above the ground, we kind of understand clouds. But not many people go underwater and understand the oceans.
At Seabird Scientific, we design and build oceanographic instrumentation used around the globe by researchers and scientists.
Our customers work on the leading edge of ocean science.
This science relies on Seabird Scientific instruments. The data we generate increases understanding and shapes policy. We enable these critically important global research projects and are proud to play a part in powering science-based decisions for a better ocean.
This company has a reputation for extremely reliable, extremely accurate instrumentation. It's been said a number of times that Seabird is the gold standard of instrumentation.
My favorite part about working at Seabird Scientific is working with a team to solve really complex and really hard problems.
What's different about Seabird is the way we work together, from our research scientists to our associates putting the instruments together, to our sales team, our marketing team, and everyone wants to do the best for Seabird.
So what I like most about working at Seabird is that you get to see a product from start to finish. And then also that relationship that we have with customers. You get to see the direct impact of the choices that you're making and the products that you're making. And you really get to feel that what you're doing is having an impact on other people's careers and the research that they're doing.
As a senior physical oceanographer at Seabird, one of my biggest jobs is to actually make your data better.
Calibration is the core piece that makes our instruments accurate and makes the measurements in the field accurate. What makes our calibration special here at Seabird is that we have an in-house metrology lab, so we're able to trace our measurements back to physical standards, and we also take the time to calibrate each sensor individually.
Metrology is fundamental to making our sensors useful and making them accurate. And especially if you want to look at changes related to climate, you have to have a very, very, very high degree of accuracy because the ocean is so large that even a small change can be significant. The level of care that we have to make our calibrations accurate is really fundamental to having that quality of data that is needed.
But at the end of the day, it's what are we doing? Because what we serve is a very important customer base. These are customers that are scientists and researchers that are really trying to understand what's going on in the world. What is our next generation going to be faced with climate change, ocean problems, feeding out of the ocean, food. And so for me, when I go to bed at night, am I happy for what I'm doing and the broader impact I'm having on the world? And that's important to me and I think to a lot of the people at Seabird.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for sitting through our brand video there. Really excited to share that and, really proud of what we do here at Seabird. So now I'm really excited to jump into Deborah Bronk from the Oceanography Society in her academia session. So Deb, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it off to you.
Okay, it is not letting me share. Oh, there I am. Good. So watching that video, a lot of those instruments look very, very familiar. Can you just see my slides? Yes, we can. Excellent. Okay. So let me move the question off of there. You can probably see that as well. So I've got, I think, 15 minutes to talk about who I am and how did I get to my current position. Right now, I'm the president and CEO of Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences. And I think kind of the theme of my career, which I did not have aspirations to become an administrator, was just kind of the unexpected perks of saying yes. Probably more than I should have, but I did it anyways. It's not letting me advance, sorry. Okay, so first, kind of where did I come from? So I was born a long way from the ocean in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I pretty much grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, again, very far from the ocean. Ironically, I spent my summers in far northern Wisconsin pretending to be an oceanographer while I floated around the little lake where we would spend our summer. And I think it's really a tribute to exposing kids to things when they're young, because from the time I was 6, I knew I wanted to be an oceanographer. I didn't really know what it was, but I watched The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And that, ironically, not an oceanographer, really set me on the path. I went to University of Miami for undergraduate. I did my graduate work at the University of Maryland. I went to the University of California at Santa Cruz for a postdoc, and ended up back in the South at the University of Georgia for my first faculty position. I then moved on to the College of William and Mary, where I was at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science for 17 years. And then moved on, 5 years ago to Bigelow Laboratory, which is in East Boothbay, Maine. So all of my research focuses on nitrogen. So I was very interested in how microbes in the ocean use nitrogen, how it is formed. And I specialized on that fraction of organic nitrogen that at the time had not received a lot of attention. So as a graduate student, I did a lot of method work in order to isolate organic nitrogen. In doing that, I looked at a lot of industry products, largely from the medical field, because seawater is an awful lot like blood. You got to get rid of the salt in blood to do a lot of the analyses. And that's what I wanted to do in terms of isolating organic nitrogen. Nitrogen is great because it is important everywhere. We eat food to get our nitrogen. Microbes in the ocean absorb it into their cells in a variety of different forms. I also had kind of a separate research program working in wastewater treatment plants. From the standpoint of a chemist, the ocean is kind of a giant vat of microbes that processes nitrogen. And that's the same thing that you see in wastewater treatment plants. So that was a really fun area of research. You wouldn't think wastewater treatment plants could be thrilling, but in fact, they are. So for those of you that are going to go down the research path, I would really encourage you to think about what skills you have and what questions you're asking in your discipline, and then what are affiliated disciplines that could use those same skills. Because being trained as an oceanographer, I think I brought a really different perspective to the wastewater treatment plant community. And that was really fun. And I learned an incredible amount about what the nitrogen processes that can happen working with engineers. So this is a little graph showing all of the places where I did research expeditions or cruises. A lot of them focused in the coastal areas because that's where nitrogen is really important. Kind of the last decade, I turned into a polar oceanographer, working in Antarctica and the Arctic. Ironically, using seabird equipment, which I am not an instrument person, so I want things to just work, and they did. And that's not, I guess I am plugging seabird. I'm just shocked at how many things I recognized on that video. So I did spend a fair bit of my time, I guess altogether 23 years in academia, first at the University of Georgia, where I was for 6 years, went through tenure, and then ended up moving to William and Mary for personal reasons. So one of the things that I was very happy to participate in this program today, though, is because academics, we're really good at creating more of ourselves, right? We know how to train students for academic research careers. The reality, though, is the world needs a lot more than people doing research. And many students today, I would say the vast majority, don't want to follow a career into academia. And yet we are pretty ill-suited, and that's the royal we in terms of universities, at helping students find other avenues that can use the same critical thinking skills that they are getting when they're in college. And an instrument company is one area that could be really useful. But one thing that was very important to my career trajectory was getting involved in scientific societies. So my postdoc advisor was a woman named Bess Ward, and she was had been elected member of large for ASLO, which is the Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography. And she encouraged me to get involved as a way of building my network, meeting people outside of the nitrogen research community. And she said it's just a lot of fun. So I ended up getting elected, served 3 years at member at large, and then ran for the president. So that was a big saying yes, because I did not want to run for president because I didn't think I would win. I thought that would be embarrassing. And but I ended up saying yes, and I did win, and it was a 6-year commitment. And it was during that experience that if you looked on paper, ASLO looked healthy, like it was a healthy science society. But Carlos Duarte was the scientist who was the president before me, and he wanted us to chart everything in a time series. And if you looked at it as a time series, all of our arrows were going in the wrong direction. And we were actually approaching a financial cliff. So I got very interested in how we needed a very different business model than we were operating under. And so that led me to look into scientific publishing. Huge numbers of careers in scientific publishing for people that love writing, that love editing, that want to facilitate the science by helping researchers get their information into the peer-reviewed press. So that's another great avenue for a career. The other part was through consultants. We needed to evaluate our business model. So we worked with economists, we work with consultants that just did business development plans. And so there was a whole other avenue that I thought could be a really cool way to go if you were more business minded and yet really loved science and wanted to support science. As a result of my involvement with ASLO, I got to attend the Council of Scientific Society Presidents meetings. So these happen twice a year in DC, and they kind of blew my blinders off on what was possible in science, how US science differed from other countries, and really how US science worked. Through CSSP, I met a whole series of executive directors people that help run science societies or are in various administrative roles in support of science throughout the country. Very important. And again, having a science background in those areas, I think gives you a leg up in terms of being able to be really effective at supporting the science. I think as a result of the ASLO business model, it was kind of a high profile presidency for a while because we had to make a lot of changes. And so NSF, people at the National Science Foundation, reached out to me on whether I would be willing to apply for a position at the foundation and go and serve. So about half of the science staff at NSF are active researchers like myself. I had a lab, I was teaching, and you take a leave of absence and you go and you serve. And so it's a way to serve the United States. It's a way to get additional experience. That was one of those times when I did not want to say yes, because I was tired after the ASLO experience. I wasn't done with ASLO, but it really changed my life, because what I found at ASLO, at NSF, is I ended up being division director, where I was managing a $356 million budget. I will never forget that number, even though I still don't know my phone number in Maine. But it was a very heady feeling to suddenly be in a position to fix things that were wrong. People could come to you and they had a problem and you actually had the power to fix things. And so that kind of gave me the administrative bug, and probably really launched me on the path that I'm on today. So after my service at NSF, I went back, I wrote a bunch of proposals, I got the lab all ginned up again. And then I just honestly was a little bored. And I knew if I was going to stay in research, I needed to kind of retool myself and expand in some different areas that I thought I would need to keep an edge, or I would take a different path. And it turned out the different path was Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences. So at Bigelow, we are an independent nonprofit. We're not affiliated with any university. It turns out that's a really great thing during the pandemic. We made our own decisions. We changed our policies sometimes on a daily basis, but we stayed open. We kept the science moving. We kept everybody healthy. The bad side is we also didn't have a big endowment to fall upon and as a backdrop. So it was a pretty scary couple of years in the beginning financially, but working at a place like Bigelow, I also see all the many ways that people with science backgrounds can be plugged in and facilitate the science. We've got science communication experts that are absolutely critical to getting what we're learning out into the hands of people that can use it. The finances of science it's different. It's very, very different than what you learn in business school. And so many of the people in our business office have some kind of science background, and that's very helpful. And how am I doing on time? I think I got a couple more minutes. So in general, a little background about Bigelow is we study the foundation of global ocean health. So that's the microbes. We focus on the microbes. And that side of Bigelow is very much academic. It's, we apply for grants to NSF and NOAA and NASA. We have graduate students that are actually enrolled at other places, but they're there. We have postdocs. It looks very much like a university. But then the second part of our mission statement is that we use our discoveries to improve the future for all life on our planet. And we do that through education and commercial activities. And it is that second kind of solution-based research that I think a lot of students are very interested in now, right? It's one thing to understand climate and climate change and how to address problems. It's a completely separate thing to get that into solutions, products or processes that can solve the problems you're quantifying on the other end. And to do that, we really need to get these processes or products into the market at scale. And so there again, it's a whole nother set of social science, understanding human behavior, economics, carbon trade, the understanding of carbon trading, lots of different skill sets are going to be required by the community, not just at a place like Bigelow, but in many, many disciplines, that an understanding and the critical thinking skills of a science degree critically important, whether you want to be an entrepreneur that's working with an organization like Bigelow to launch companies, or to work for other companies or consulting firms. I think this is just a really great time to be coming out with degrees early in your career or even late in your career. It's never too late to change, and the world needs people to dive into these challenges in whatever way they think they can fit in and make a difference. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I think turn it back over to Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you, Deb. That was awesome. And, even just the point you mentioned about science communicators and people in science finance, just like those skills, super critical and really important and integral roles in any organization. So just wanted to call that out as a really key point there. So thank you so much. That was great. And now we're going to pass it off to Jochen, Klinke, and Genevieve Howell at CBIRD to talk about their paths through industry and academia as well. So Jochen and Genevieve, take it away.
Thanks, Lindsay. You can go to the next slide, Jochen. So we're here to talk about sort of the industry session, but for me, academia and industry are not as separate as they can sometimes be presented. So sometimes academia is presented as a path for those who want knowledge for knowledge's sake. You're exploring new areas, or you're improving oceanographic knowledge, and then you're publishing papers to share your findings. And sometimes you do research mainly for the sake of learning. Industry, on the other hand, can sometimes be presented as a necessary evil, maybe prioritizing growth and earnings above all other impacts. And there are some corporations that are run that way, but for CBIRD Scientific, we see our company as part of this interconnected system that's valuable because of how we support oceanographic scientists and how the data and scientific insights that are generated using our products are applied. And it's the application of science. It's getting to see the results of your work and the impact that work is having on society real time that can kind of differentiate career paths. And we know now that basic science encompasses oceanography on a global scale. And this capability and this need to conduct global scale studies have led to planning of large scale, long-term, very cooperative experiments that are managed through national or international groups. They can involve scientists, agencies, industry partners, often from multiple countries, and they're organized to explore new questions. And they also test different mechanisms for working together. And it's a real challenge for these large scale efforts to be sustained in a scientifically and technically sound manner. And to do that involves coordinating the plans of nations, federal agencies, academic institutions, individual scientists, and the industry partners that underpin it all. And so there's a lot of options when it comes to what direction you want to take your career in. And I just want to take a moment and emphasize, I think you heard this from Deborah earlier, but this really isn't an or discussion. You're not making a choice right now that's going to be cast in stone and locking yourself into a single path. And in fact, Jochen and I have both had very non-linear career paths that we're happy to share with you. So if you want to move to the next slide, perfect. So I came into this industry fresh out of grad school, where I studied marine mammal acoustics using hydrophones and homegrown data acquisition systems. And when I moved out to Seattle, I thought I vaguely remembered using a CBIRD CTD along with the SECI disc, which is going to tell you how old I am. And I was like, okay, all right, maybe this will be a good company for me for a while until I find my real job. Because I had a very conventional idea of a career path being linear, the ladder kind of view. But in reality, I started off as a calibration technician and got got really excited about calibration. It can be very dry to a lot of people, but just the idea that that it was so integral to creating the accuracy that I knew was so important for scientists to have, it was exciting. And then it was also an opportunity for me to build my abilities to build process and efficiency. So I would look at ways of work that was being done and think, well, this is awful. We should do it differently. And I had a lot of freedom and opportunity to make those changes at Seabird. So that led up to a path through calibration. And again, some of these roles kind of built on each other naturally, but some of them were left turns or really I didn't see them coming. So one of those choices was becoming a people leader. It's a very different set of skills that you build when you're leading and managing others and helping them build their careers. The other thing that I was surprised to find was interesting to me was being in operations, being in a manufacturing setting where you actually get the tangible results of what you're doing was really exciting. The biggest left turn was for me getting into supply chain. Which I knew nothing about before I became the director of supply chain. But I learned how to build and manage a team that does things that I don't know how to do myself. And that opened up many doors for me. So many, in fact, that I have been with Seabird for 20 years now. So it's a little bit about my path, but Jochen is going to share a little bit about his here.
Moving. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And you can see me too?
Yes.
Okay, good. So my path is definitely a bit different than Genevieve's. Mostly in that I spent almost half my career in academia before making the jump to industry. Did that first at a small startup before joining a larger corporation. I can tell you this is not really how I planned it. And at times I felt I was kind of really encountering these unexpected directions that I pursued, even though I wasn't really quite sure why at the time. So my background is in applied physics. Initially, I developed optical measurement techniques that are used to study exchange processes between ocean and atmosphere. I was enrolled at a university in Germany, and there is not that much ocean accessible in Germany. So I was actually working at the same time as a dev tech at Scripps to do actually my research work. That research continued through my role of postdoc and before I transitioned into a permanent position as a specialist. One thing to note is that when you're having a permanent position, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a salary. So this was a soft money position, and I spent a considerable amount of time just funding my salary every year by getting research projects funded through grants. One of the projects was developing a CTD that could be deployed from ships while they're underway. So this was really my first exposure working with CTDs and also some Seabird equipment. It came with the interesting stipulation from the funding agency, I think it was NOAA or ONR at the time, that if we can make this technology work to really make it available to all ocean researchers, and Scripps was really a research institution and not a manufacturing place. So at the end of the project, we were kind of looking for opportunities to commercialize that technology outside of Scripps. And that prompted me to leave the academic arena and join a small startup. I can tell you this was really not an easy decision, really to leave a permanent position for a rather risky endeavor. So I kind of struggled with that. Initially, I was hired on as a senior scientist, but when you are employee number 11 in a small company, you're really wearing a lot of hats, probably more than actually shown here. Anywhere from being a designer, a firmware engineer, assembler, customer support, marketing. One thing that was really good, this company that I was in grew steadily, and by the time we were acquired by a larger company, we almost had 40 employees. I did enjoy really that kind of small company culture where you have to wear all these different hats. And so at that time, I decided to take a break from work. And initially, the plan was really to kind of take about 5 years off and kind of make up my mind about what I want to do next. And about 2 years into my break, I got a chance to interview at Siebert. It was called Siebert Electronics at the time. And I wasn't sure whether I was ready to go back to work, but what won me over after a full day of interviewing here was really how passionate everyone was about making a difference with their job daily. So that's the kind of job that really appealed to me. And I decided to join the company initially in the product management team as an individual contributor. And since then, I have kind of transitioned into people management, currently leading the science team at Siebert Scientific. So my path was similarly convoluted as Genevieve's. And I thought maybe it would be a good opportunity to look back and see what the differences were from me working in academia versus industry. So kind of looking at the research specifically in academia, you had really the opportunity to pursue research to your heart's content. Well, as long as you were able to bring in your salary, so it really required some grant writing time every year, about 25%, I would say. It was quite self-directed because we had a really small lab at the time. And I really enjoyed that kind of freedom. One thing that was obviously a little difficult was having that constant pressure of bringing in your own salary. So I kind of took the time to look up some numbers, and this is a little bit before I was in the university system. I found that about almost 40% of the positions were actually tenured positions, while about half of them were contingent, meaning that you typically have a contract from 1 to 3 years, but not really a permanent role at the university. According to the American Association of University Professors, this has changed quite a bit. So the most recent numbers show that only a quarter of the positions at the university are actually tenured, and the contingent department has grown to almost over 2/3. So I think there's definitely a trend here. It was hard to find a faculty position at the time I was there. It's probably even harder now. So kind of looking at my industry experience, it kind of spans the gamut from the private startup to the public corporation. So, and it probably is really hard to make generalization in that regard, but I think one of the really common things I can tell you is everything in the industry sector is really product, market, and customer focused. And it has to be that way in order to really achieve longevity. Even the applied science that we do at Siebert is with that in mind. So if you think about the role of science at Siebert, it's really all about supporting external and internal customers. Genevieve mentioned that we do this by partnering with researchers in oceanography to drive technology innovation, but we also do it within Siebert by providing this kind of subject matter expertise to the different functions within Siebert, whether that's solving an escalated technical issue or providing methods for calibration and driving the accuracy of our instruments further. So this is quite a spectrum of responsibilities that comes with that role of science in Siebert. We're actually in the process of posting a role for a physical oceanographer in the upcoming weeks. So if you're interested in that kind of work, please go to our career page on the website and keep checking there. So one thing I have to say that I found really valuable in industry, having transferable skills, maybe not such special skills, but skills that you can really apply to different areas. Teamwork is really at the basis of what we're doing, not just within your own function, but also across functions in general. And ultimately, I think what really helps if you're aligned with company goals and you find them as so-called SMART goals, they're really very specific in that regard. I thought it would be useful to kind of take a look at what early career professionals at Siebert do. We have actually had quite a bit of early career professionals over the years at Siebert. You can see kind of the entry points were traditionally more on the R&D and science and maybe tech support side, but quite frankly, it really spans all different functions from product management, software, data science, sales and marketing and operations right now. I'm not going to go into the detail of what people kind of that I interviewed shared, but I definitely noticed a few themes. And there's one thing that was really obvious, considering internships in industry earlier rather than later in your studies, because it helps you potentially pivot and adjust your curriculum accordingly. I think one of the other realizations was that being open to learning is really key in this industry environment. I think that speaks to the transferable skills, really. And having a broad skill set rather than specialized skills is really useful. And I think you'll see that as Genevieve is going to talk about the next point here.
Thanks, Jochen. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the need for gender diversification in ocean business. And this can be hard to talk about without inadvertently leaning into the gender binary. So some of the data that you're seeing on the slide right now comes from issues blockers and accelerators for those who identify as women. But make no mistake, there is a need to provide the same opportunities for people of all gender identities in ocean business. And why is that? Why do we care about that? Why does that matter? From my perspective, it makes good business sense. So there's a recent Gallup poll that has shown that gender diverse teams perform better than single gender teams. They have different viewpoints, different ideas, different insights. They're able to bring different perspectives, which can lead to better problem solving and ultimately better performance. A gender diverse team better serves an increasingly diverse customer base. And then having a gender diverse team also helps attract and retain talented people across the gender spectrum. So how are we doing in oceanography? So according to a paper published this year in the Annual Review of Marine Science, we see women making up 50% of those getting their PhDs. So that's great. Close to 50% of those are going on to become assistant professors. But that drops to 40% for associate professors, and only 22% of full professors were women in 2020. In ocean business, we see those that identify as women are still deeply underrepresented in technical roles, and we're losing ground. According to a study from McKinsey, we are down from 18% of those that identify as women being in a technical or engineering role in 2018 to 16% in 2022. So this is something that we want to address. We know this is an important element of having a strong and capable team. And part of that is attracting talent, and some of it is also retaining talent. So unsurprisingly, 32% of women who are in those technical or engineering roles are often the only woman in the room at work. And that can be difficult. Onlys stand out and can be more heavily scrutinized. They're more likely to encounter comments or behaviors that leave them feeling othered or excluded or reduced to a negative stereotype. And they can also be burdened with the education of the others in the room, or expected to speak on behalf of an entire marginalized group. And so these are issues that we want to address. Again, they're highlighted when you're an only, but that representation, even if you are an only, that representation matters so much. When we see women and people of color and gender diverse folks in leadership, when we see them in science, in technical roles, it's a signal to all of us that we can advance our careers to those places. And it also matters because representation is critical for uncovering and recognizing systemic discrimination. So weird interactions can happen at any time for a whole variety of reasons, just basic social ineptitude. But when you aren't the only one to have had that experience or that interaction, when you realize that there's a pattern to the behavior or the outcome, that's when we can really get to the work of unmasking systemic biases and focusing on eliminating them. So we can't just build diverse teams. We also have to foster the inclusivity that really allows people to be authentic and contribute at their highest level. So that's a business priority for us at Seabird Scientific. And wherever your path leads, I would encourage you to make it a priority for yourself as well. That's it for the industry session here. But if you have any more questions, we're going to do a panel and a Q&A. But Jochen and I are also going to be at the happy hour later on. So feel free to flag us down. We're available to answer your questions along with a few other folks from Seabird. So we'll be there to follow up more if you're interested.
Awesome. Thank you, Jochen. Genevieve, that was great. Genevieve, thank you so much for touching on gender diversity. So important. And I think honestly from Deb, Jochen, and Genevieve, I think like the mentality here is say yes, go for things maybe that you aren't, that you haven't done before, or maybe you don't check all of the boxes, but say yes to things, do things that are maybe outside of your comfort zone, and you will be rewarded. So it was really great to hear from all of you on your career paths through ocean science, whether it was academia or industry. And, kind of thinking about it from that perspective, now that we're heading into our panel session where each of you will kind of have an opportunity to talk about or to answer some questions specifically, thinking about skills, like what kind of personal characteristics or skills do you think would be valuable for a person to have in ocean science? And maybe Deborah, I'll throw this one to you first and see what you think.
Okay, can I just say one follow-up to the whole idea about saying yes, and there's a great book called Women Don't Ask. It's not long, and I read it with a group of young women when I was at NSF, and it had really interesting data. Most women will not apply for a job unless they feel they have can mark off and say yes to virtually all of the qualifications. In contrast, many men will apply for jobs that if they only have a few of the qualifications. And so put your hat in the ring, even if you don't think you have all of the things that you need. You don't have to have all of the things that a place is asking for. Sometimes you will just have that spark that is exactly what they're looking for. And you can always get trained. And I think that's going to be a theme that's only going to get more important in the future. Places are going to be willing to train you to do what they need because it is a rapidly moving space, no matter what you do. So getting good at being trained is, and put your hat out there. So you said personal characteristics. I think that one thing I learned as a professor over the years is I would gladly take a scrappy C student that worked 2 jobs and, helped their dad build the garage than a straight A student from an Ivy League college because one is going to figure it out and the other one has, I think, more of a likelihood of they're not used to failing. And yet science, I saw Sue Banahan is on the call. She ran the lab that I got my PhD in. I mean, I failed spectacularly again and again and again. If you do methods development, you spend a lot of time in the trough on the sine wave of success. So, and I captured those failures in beautifully annotated, color-coded notebooks, by the way. So I think being scrappy, being stubborn, not giving up, I think those are some of the main, really most important. And I know at least when I started grad school, I didn't think I could be a researcher. I wanted to get my PhD. I don't even know why. I probably read something that you're supposed to have one. My plan was to move to Maryland because I wanted to kind of be independent. And then I was going to move back to Miami and marry Ralph. And Ralph's a great guy, but I should not have done that. And it was probably my 3rd year in my PhD when I had a committee meeting and I was thinking, I can do this, what these people are doing. And I think it's because I was creative and I was organized and I was stubborn. I did not give up. And those, I think, are really key things. not so much being a genius, right? Which I think if you don't come from a science background, or I didn't know any scientists, who did I know? I knew Einstein. So I kind of thought to be a scientist, you had to be a genius. The answer is no. And I would say some of my smartest colleagues can't get out of their own way. So again, I would take a scrappy, stubborn, creative person. I think those are skills that will serve you very well. If you are a straight A Ivy League student, I didn't mean to diss on you, but just be scrappy too. You got to have that. Then you're the full package.
Yeah, sounds like it takes a level of grit to be, successful. So great, Deb. Thank you for that. Jochen, I'm going to throw this over to you. What kind of skills do you think are really important in a career in ocean science?
It's actually very similar to what Deb said. I think it's not getting discouraged when you don't know the answer to something. And I think that is really key. And it reminds me a little bit of how testing in the university in Germany works, where it's mostly all exams. So there isn't really questions, or the direction this exam can take can be very excruciating for the person in the exam, because as soon as you know the answer, they switch the topic until they get to a point where you don't know the answer anymore to that question. And that's when really, that's what they want to see is, how do you handle that situation? How do you apply the things that you have learned in the past to the specific situation when you don't know the answer? And I think that's something that is a really valuable skill.
Awesome. Thank you, Jochen. And Genevieve, what are your thoughts?
It's hard to be additive to what they've already mentioned, but just to build sort of on that tenacity component. I would also say like just a drive to learn. And so one of my favorite comics that I have in my office is from XKCD, and it's this little stick figure guy, and he pulls on a lever and he gets zapped, and there's two paths, right? And the normal person is like, oh, I guess I shouldn't do that again. And then the scientist is, I wonder if that happens every time. And I love that. I just love that. And I feel like that's the kind of energy and curiosity that will serve you no matter what. And being able to demonstrate and show that, again, in maybe some far-flung and radical kind of roles or tangential things that you never really thought about before, really can provide a path. And you don't have to have it all mapped out ahead of time. You can forge your way through, one step at a time.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I think one of the biggest lessons I learned, and it was when I was ASLO president, which I went into it feeling, there's a big imposter syndrome out there. It's like, what the hell am I doing in this role? And some of the best advice I got is, you don't need to know it all. You just need to be willing to say, I don't know. And then you find somebody that does. And I wish I had learned that earlier in my career, because it was the most freeing thing and modeling that behavior in my role now, I think is really healthy for the whole lab. You don't need to bullshit your way. If you don't know, say, I don't know, and we'll help you. We'll all figure it out. And especially, I know for some of you that are finishing grad school or in your first job, I think that's where that imposter syndrome can be the worst, right? It's like, why was I picked out of all of these applicants? So just say, I don't know, it's not a big deal, but then have the tenacity to figure out, because that's what people are going to notice. And if you say you don't know, everyone else will breathe a sigh of relief, because they don't know either. So let's just figure it out together. It's really healthy and helpful.
Definitely. Yeah. It's okay to not know is the takeaway. So not all of us know everything. So thanks, Deb, for that add in. So we have 5 minutes left. So we're going to quickly transition into the Q&A. We had a few questions come in. And so I think a few of these are targeted at Genevieve and Jochen. So I'm going to just read them off, and then whoever wants to take one or take them can go ahead. So somebody wrote in, Jochen and Genevieve, you both mentioned moving from a scientist towards people managers while in industry. Have you seen successful transitions directly from a postdoc researcher into a people manager in industry, for example, as a project manager?
I do not know the resumes of everybody who I have encountered. But what I do know, so I don't know about the postdoc piece specifically, but what I do know is a lot of the skills that you develop there are absolutely transferable. And what I think makes people leaders, good people leaders, is the ability to listen to different perspectives and incorporate that into their decision-making process. So, so if you're able to cast that wide net, again, kind of along the theme of you don't know what you don't know, or sometimes you do know that you don't know, but being able to bring together and stitch together a wide variety of perspectives to kind of get to that next best step, that's a highly transferable skill into people leadership.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so then next, and this is, I guess, thrown also at CBIRD again. So someone wrote in, I'm currently a postdoc with expertise in analyzing observational data from several platforms, but no experience in electronics and instrumentation. What kind of roles can I apply for at CBIRD? And does CBIRD organize any implementation workshops for scientists and researchers?
I think it sounds like a ideal fit for a role in the science department. If you ask me, you don't have to have these hands-on skills as much, and having transferable skills. Data is very similar across disciplines, you know. So I think what sometimes is helpful, having experience with actually equipment, which is different from having skills in electronics specific. So I think that is a really valuable skill.
Great. So it sounds like that person needs to get in touch with Jochen. And the last question we have here is, when is the best time to do an internship in the industry during PhD, or is it after comprehensive exams? What time is best?
I think I touched a bit on that already earlier. Do it way before you go for your PhD. Do it as early as you can in your academic career or in your education side, because you may learn that you want to pivot, that whatever you thought you were cut out to be is actually not quite what it seems to be, and it gives you a chance to kind of adjust your coursework, adjust your curriculum in that regard. And I would recommend doing this as early as you can.
Awesome, thank you. And then we just had another question go in, and Deb, I'm going to throw this one to you. What kind of skills does TOS look for in an Earth Systems science student who is looking for an internship or part-time role or full-time role? Deb, you're on mute.
Sorry, there were dogs in the background. So TOS doesn't have positions like that. So we have Jenny, who is on the call, and we have Ellen, who's our editor. So we don't have any positions. But in terms of just general positions, put down everything that you've got on your CV and send up. TOS has a job board, ASLO has a job board, AGU has a job board. Look at all the various job boards and just email people and ask for advice. I mean, if you want to email me. I mean, I get those all the time. And usually people are pretty good about responding to students or early career asking for advice. And if they don't, then they're jerks and you don't want to have anything to do with them anyways. But just mostly talk to people and just apply. Even if you are wrong for that position, you got to be kind of close. I mean, don't be completely out of bounds. But sometimes, I know in one case, one of our positions that we hired, a person applied, they looked fantastic. They were clearly wrong, but I kept that resume because I knew at some point, if they were still available, they would be a good fit. So it just puts you in front of people. But yeah, if you need anything more specific, send me an email.
I echo that. Apply anyway. And again, because it might be like, oh, this person isn't quite right for this role, but I know this other role over here. So there's value in doing that and building your network. And you can do that through social media, but you can also do it in person. You can take advantage of scientific conferences that you're attending. Walk the expo, which I never did, but it's worth it because again, it's going to expose you to all of these different businesses that are doing all of these different things. And it's a great opportunity to ask people questions and kind of suss out different opportunities that you might not otherwise have thought about.
Definitely. Yeah. All great points. Deb, Jochen, and Genevieve. We are about out of time here. I just wanted to leave it open if you guys had any closing thoughts before I pull up the invitation for the happy hour tonight.
I would say, Samuel, if you want to send me an email, I just saw a question. I'm not an atmospheric scientist, but I know atmospheric scientists. So send me an email and I'll see if I can point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Jochen? You're on mute.
I have a mug actually that says you're on mute, so I think people need to use that on me. But if you have a chance to be at the happy hour today, just feel free to stop in and ask more questions. You know, this is a great opportunity to connect with people in the industry. Otherwise, go to people's LinkedIn, you know, and see where potentially their career was, and find connections that way.
Genevieve?
I saw something came in the chat about CBIRD offering instrumentation training workshops for scientists and researchers. Yes, we do. You can check out our website. You can also reach out. We have different things that we run periodically. We also have a blog and FAQs that are on our website. But feel free to reach out to me if you want more specifics. And yeah, overall, I think, you know, ocean business needs you. we need everybody. So take a look at those different opportunities. Think broadly about what your career could look like, and don't be afraid to take kind of a weird step.
Hear, hear.
Awesome. Well, I just want to first thank Deborah, Jochen, Genevieve. It was so great to learn more about your career paths through academia and industry. I'm impressed by the number of roles, different types of roles that you guys have held, and now need to keep myself to that standard, and we'll be saying yes moving forward. So thank you guys all. It's also great. Jenny, thank you so much for all of your hard work in putting this webinar together. We're so grateful to have the Oceanography Society as one of our partners, and we're looking forward to doing another one of these webinars again soon. Thanks to all of those on the line. And before you go, I just wanted to quickly share an invitation. If you are local to the Seattle area, please come find us tonight from 6 to 7:30 at Skull in Ballard for a networking and happy hour. There will be drinks and small snacks. So please come network with us. I'll be there. Jochen and Genevieve will also be there. Deborah and Jenny will sadly not be there because they're on the East Coast, but they will be there in spirit. And so we're really looking forward to connecting with you all. So please come find us. And I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Go Seabird.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go toss. What am I doing?
Go toss. Go toss.